There are three things that you should do to every file when first starting off with Photoshop. The first thing you should do is make sure that your file is saved as a .psd or Photoshop document. I can see up in my title bar right now that this is currently a JPEG, so I definitely want to go to the File menu and choose Save As. And then from there, I have a format drop-down that I can choose Photoshop from, and that's going to give it a .psd extension for Photoshop document. Within this Mac interface, I could choose where I want to save to, like the desktop. And I'm going to keep the original JPEG name that came with it, which was Kitten Basket, but now it has a .psd extension. This is so important to do because if you're taking a file off of the internet or from a digital camera, if it's saved as a JPEG and you keep saving it that way, it's going to strip away more and more detail over time through optimization, which is what makes JPEG small for the web. It's also just a good practice because the PSD is going to be your original file that has all the editable layers and adjustments and things like that that you can change throughout your file. So I'm just going to click Save here, and I can see that it's successfully changed because it says .psd up in the title bar. The next thing you want to check is the resolution, and you can do that by going to the Image menu and then Image Size. And here we can see that the current resolution of this file is 72. Now that's okay for internet use, but we want that more for the output file, not the original PSD. Your PSD should be at least 300 pixels per inch. 300 is how many pixels that print requires. It actually translates into dots when put into a printer. That's the little bits of ink that come out on the page. So we want this to at least be at 300 just in case we need to use it for web or for print. You don't ever want to go from small to big in Photoshop. You want to have more than enough pixels or size for that matter to whittle down to what you need and not go up. So I could just type in 300 here. However, you're going to see something change. At the top, it was telling me the size of this file. It was currently 66.1 megabytes, but it was 3.81. So the dramatic shift in size is because we just added a bunch of pixels to this document by just typing in 300. What Photoshop does by default is resample the image, which means that it will add pixels. And that might seem like a good idea, but whenever you add pixels, you're spreading out the ones that were originally there, and therefore causing a loss in quality because it creates kind of a blur as far as the colors go. So ideally, we don't want to resample. We want to actually uncheck that and have the pixels be sacrificed from the width and height. So it's going to keep the same amount of pixels, but just condense them. So I could click Cancel here because I can't just check resample and have it work. It's still set at 300. There's a fun trick in Photoshop or any Adobe program that every time you have a dialog box, if you hold on the Option key or Alt on the PC, the Cancel button becomes Reset. So that'll go back to my original settings. And here I'll see what happens if I uncheck Resample and then type in 300. Okay, so you can see that this was 14 by 14 inches, but now it's sacrificed from that width and height to add to the density of the resolution. The higher resolution you have, the higher the quality. So we want this to at least be 300, even though web stuff is 72, and that's because only your screen can represent 72 pixels per inch. So even though it's going to be 300, we'll only see 72 pixels of that per inch. So ideally, you don't want resample checked. I got what I wanted here. I'm going to click OK. And here I've made a change to my PSD, so I want to save. I know I've made a change because I remember doing it, but I also have this little asterisk at the end of the title bar. That means that there is an unsaved change. It's a little thing that Adobe borrowed from Macromedia. So I'm just going to go Command or Control S, and that goes away because I've saved my change. This is a much denser picture now, but we're not going to see that on the monitor. We're only going to see it if we print it because it's over 72 pixels. So after saving it as a PSD and making sure it's the right resolution, which is going to be really crucial with anything from a digital camera, the last thing that most files need is an adjustment layer. It doesn't matter how good of a photographer you are or how nice the lighting was, pretty much every file can benefit from a little tonal tweak. Now, some of you might have been taught to do this by going to your Image menu and choosing Adjustments, Levels. I don't want you to do that because that is a destructive editing habit, It actually damages the histogram or value scale of the image and does damage that we can't repair once we've saved the file. So instead of doing that, we're going to go one menu over to Layer and choose New Adjustment Layer. Now I have the basic workspace settings, so I'm not seeing all of my items. So I just have to check Show All Menu Items. And then I could choose New Adjustment Layer, Levels. Okay, so this is a really important thing to jot down. Layer, New Adjustment Layer, Levels. I could give it a name. I'm just going to click OK for now because it's early. And this actually added a new layer above my background. It's something I could toggle on and off or change the opacity of. And I still get the same dialog box that I would have if I went image adjustments, but the beautiful thing is that these sliders stay in place. They're not going to cause any damage, they're reversible, they're editable, so I have full control over the tonal balance of my document. I'm adding more black here by dragging this black slider to the right, and likewise I could add more white by dragging this white handle to the left. And just using your eye and judgment, you could see when it becomes too much. These look kind of like radioactive kittens now. So I'm going to lower that white down a little and just add a little black. And the best thing about having it as a separate adjustment layer is not only is it non-destructive, but it's easy to turn on and off to see the difference in what you've done to the image. So I could just poke it in the eyeball in the layer palette and turn it on and off. So this is my changes, and this is what it looked like before. So you can see we punched up the contrast quite a bit. I've got that asterisk at the top, which means I can go Command or Control S to save. And usually you do want to maximize compatibility. I just struggled with that word, so I'm going to click OK. And there we have it. I had a JPEG, which is now a PSD. I can make more and more changes to it, which I'll do in the next lesson. And it's the right resolution for print or web in the future. And on top of all that, I've got totally editable corrections that I can make. And I fought against Photoshop's destructive nature right from the beginning.